A person can understand their diagnosis, know the names of their medications, recognize their symptoms, and still feel like they do not have a life worth living. That is the difference between simply managing an illness and building a meaningful recovery. What's up, family? I'm Derek Traylor, and welcome to From Hustle to Healing Studios. Today we're talking about illness management and recovery, better known as IMR. But this conversation is bigger than a workbook. It is bigger than completing modules. And it is bigger than teaching somebody how to recognize symptoms or remember an appointment. Because recovery is not only about reducing symptoms. Recovery is also about rebuilding hope, developing confidence, strengthening relationships, finding safe housing, returning to work, reconnecting with family, and believing that your life still has purpose. That is where IMR is supposed to take us. Illness management and recovery is an evidence-based program created to help people with serious mental illness develop practical strategies for managing their conditions while pursuing personal recovery goals. It combines several approaches: psychoeducation, motivational strategies, cognitive behavioral techniques, coping skills development, relapse prevention, social skills training, and personal goal setting. The traditional program contains 11 modules and can be delivered individually or in groups. But here is what we cannot forget. The modules are the structure. They are not the recovery. The recovery belongs to the person. The workbook may help guide the conversation, but it should never become more important than the person sitting in front of us. A 2026 research review examined 33 studies of recovery-oriented training for healthcare professionals and peer support workers. The researchers made an important distinction between clinical recovery and personal recovery. Clinical recovery generally focuses on symptoms, medication, treatment adherence, hospitalization, and functioning. Those things matter, but personal recovery asks a different set of questions. Does this person have hope? Do they have meaningful choices? Do they feel heard? Do they have a sense of purpose? Are they participating in decisions about their own life? Do they believe that something better is still possible? Clinical recovery might ask, are the symptoms improving? Personal recovery also asks, is the person building a life they actually want to live? We need both, but too often, behavioral health systems concentrate on clinical improvement and assume that personal recovery will automatically follow. It does not always happen that way. A person can be medication compliant and still be lonely. They can attend every appointment and still be homeless. They can complete every assignment and still believe that nothing will ever change. That is why recovery-oriented practice must go further. The 2026 review found that recovery-oriented training generally improved workers' knowledge and attitudes. The most effective approaches emphasized understanding personal recovery, examining staff and team attitudes, building collaborative relationships, respecting the person's autonomy, strengthening hope, and supporting the person's own motivation. But the review also uncovered a serious problem. Good training did not always become good practice. Why? Because workers returned from training to the same environments, heavy caseloads, limited time, staff shortages, organizational resistance, professional hierarchies, and team members who may understand treatment but do not fully believe in recovery. That means a worker can attend an excellent training on Friday and return Monday morning to a system that rewards paperwork, speed, compliance, and risk management more than relationships, hope, and personal growth. The researchers warn us not to assume that the training itself failed. Sometimes the training was never properly supported after the classroom ended. That is the heart of this conversation. Recovery-oriented practice cannot survive as a one-time training. It has to become part of the culture. A separate 2025 study examined the experiences of 36 practitioners who delivered IMR in mental health settings. The practitioners described IMR as a program about everyday life, not merely symptom reduction. They believed IMR helped people develop practical tools to live meaningful lives while managing serious mental health challenges. The program helped shift the conversation away from how do we eliminate every symptom and toward how can this person live better even while some symptoms remain. That is powerful. But the study also identified tension between the structured IMR curriculum and the deeply personal nature of recovery. A manual provides consistency, but recovery does not happen in the same order for everybody. One person may need to work on coping with stress, another may need help repairing a family relationship, someone else may need housing before they can concentrate on anything else, and another person may need to believe they are worthy of recovery before they can begin setting goals. The research suggests that IMR remains recovery-oriented when the facilitator listens, adapts the material, and connects every lesson to the person's life. The facilitator has to tune in. Otherwise, IMR can become another program being done to somebody instead of a recovery process being built with them. The 2025 IMR study raised another critical issue. Recovery is not only individual, it is also social. We can teach someone coping skills, but what happens when they do not have safe housing? We can discuss stress management. But what happens when they cannot afford food? We can teach relapse prevention, but what happens when they return to the same environment where their trauma, substance use, or instability began? We can encourage medication adherence. But what happens when they do not have transportation to the pharmacy? Housing matters, employment matters, money matters, family relationships matter, community acceptance matters, safety matters. These are not excuses. They are conditions that influence recovery. People should be encouraged to take responsibility for their decisions, but we must also recognize the barriers surrounding those decisions. That is especially important in re-entry work. A person can leave prison motivated to change and still face housing discrimination, unemployment, family conflict, community stigma, supervision requirements, and untreated trauma. If we ignore those realities, we may label someone unmotivated when they are actually overwhelmed. Recovery-oriented IMR connects coping skills to real living conditions. This is where peer support specialists have something powerful to contribute. Peer support is not based only on professional knowledge. It also uses lived experience, mutuality, encouragement, and the belief that recovery is possible. A peer can help transform an IMR lesson from information into application. If the module addresses stress, the peer can help the person identify what stress actually looks like in their daily life. If the lesson addresses relapse prevention, the peer can help identify warning signs, trusted contacts, safe places, and a realistic response plan. If the lesson covers personal goals, the peer can help turn a broad goal into one achievable next step. And when it is appropriate and beneficial, a peer can use lived experience to communicate. I know what it feels like when people only see your diagnosis, your addiction, your incarceration, or your worst decision. But that is not the complete story of who you are. That message can restore something no workbook can produce by itself: hope. If an organization wants IMR to work, handing employees a manual is not enough. Workers need initial training, ongoing supervision, opportunities to practice, observation and feedback, team discussions, refresher sessions, leadership support, and time to build genuine relationships. Organizations should also examine whether their policies support recovery. Do service plans contain the person's own goals or only the agency's requirements? Are peer specialists treated as equal team contributors? Is lived experience respected as a form of knowledge? Are staff members encouraged to take time to listen? Do supervisors reinforce person-centered language? Are outcomes limited to symptoms and hospitalizations? Or do we also measure housing stability, employment, relationships, hope, confidence, and community participation? You cannot build a recovery-oriented organization through training alone. The values taught in the classroom must be reinforced in supervision, documentation, staffing, leadership, and daily decisions. Here are 5 questions we can use during every IMR interaction. First, what matters most to this person right now? Second, how does today's lesson connect to that goal? Third, what strengths and lived experiences can the person build upon? Fourth, what social barriers, such as housing, transportation, money, employment, or relationships, could interfere with progress? And fifth, what is one action the person chooses to take before the next meeting? That final part matters. The person chooses the action. We can provide information, we can explore options, we can offer encouragement, but recovery must not become another place where somebody else takes control of the person's life. Recovery is not the absence of every struggle. It is the presence of hope, choice, skills, support, and a reason to keep moving. IMR gives us a valuable structure, but a structure becomes recovery-oriented only when we use it to help people build lives that matter to them, not lives that simply look compliant on paper, not lives controlled entirely by a diagnosis, not lives measured only by whether someone stayed out of the hospital, meaningful lives, connected lives, self-directed lives. That is the standard. Train the worker, support the worker, strengthen the team, listen to the person, address the real-life barriers, and never allow the illness to become bigger than the human being experiencing it. Because people are not diagnoses to be managed. They are human beings with strengths, dreams, relationships, responsibilities, and futures. That is the difference between completing an IMR program and helping someone build a life in recovery. I'm Derek Traylor, and this is From Hustle to Healing Studios, from hustle to healing to legacy.